So does anyone else here feel that they have white privilege? I see Linda's husband, who I can't remember your name, raising his hand. But you're still muted. Let me unmute you. Okay, you're unmuted.
One of the things we talked about is that if you're a white Jew, you could pass. Until we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the more we're aware of that distinction when we don't, the more perhaps the more sensitive we could be to this question.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. And yeah, also implicit in that is not every Jew is white passing or white presenting. There are plenty of Jews of color from all kinds of different backgrounds. So yeah, thank you. What else? Who else would like to share?
I would like to share. And my answer is, of course I have white privilege. I'm not worried that when I'm stopped by a police officer, he's going to think I'm going to pull a gun on him. I'm not worried about that. I don't want to be stopped. It makes me nervous. But of course I have white privilege. And I'm sorry, I get very emotional about this one. This is kind of my hot button here. When I was younger, I dated a young man who was African American, and he was saying how he was always getting stopped by the cops in Los Altos, California. And I kind of thought, he's very dramatic anyway. He's kind of exaggerating. And to make a long story short, he was coming over to my house to see me, and I was driving away, and I stopped, told him where I was going. He said, "Oh, I'd like to hitch a ride with you." I said, "Get in the car." Next thing I knew, I had a cop's face in my window. "Is everything all right here, ma'am?" This gentleman seemed to be wandering in and out of the bushes and talking to himself. Well, he was walking in and out of the bushes because they were hanging out in the street. And he was probably singing because he was a semi-professional singer. That officer followed us. And every time I changed lanes, he changed lanes. Every time I turned, he turned for about 3 miles. And then apparently he got a call because he went off with his lights and sirens in another direction. And I never disbelieved my friend after that, ever. And I was very well aware from that time on what a difference it makes, the color. And it has always upset me when people say, "Oh, I'm not privileged. I'm white, but I'm not privileged. I was poor and I had to work for everything I got." And I go, man, there are so many people that just do not understand. I said, imagine you were all that and black too. Sorry, I get really emotional about this stuff. I'm very, very emotional this week.
Yeah, no, I think you make a really good point there, right? Because there are different spectrums on which we do or do not have privilege, race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and a lot of times class. A lot of times people will look at the place where they are less privileged and don't realize that that doesn't erase the areas where they are privileged. It doesn't mean that you aren't having a hard time. It just means that the color of your skin isn't making it harder.
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems obvious, but people don't get it.
Yeah, so the question to ask, again, we're going to ask this group right now. Does anybody here, raise your hand, does anybody here wish they were black? Anybody? I mean, the way this society treats you, does anybody prefer to be black?
Of course.
Yeah. So then the question back to us, maybe this is, looking internally, what are we doing about it? How can we be complacent with the situation? How can we move forward? What can we do? And that's what I've been struggling with. So hopefully Greg will help us out.
Carol, I want to hear from a variety of voices.
I know, but could I respond just one thing? That one thing we could do is shut up and listen to the black people. That's all I have to say.
Well, I mean, I think there's things that you can do. You can look for black businesses that you can support. Can you eat at their restaurants or get the takeout from their restaurants? Hire them if you're going to get some catering done. Try to really support the small businesses that are out there. I think when you see something racist, you know, you need to say something. I mean, and even if it's just to them, I mean, like I saw, you know, I just happened to be somewhere where a taxi driver like wouldn't pick up this black man. And, you know, and even when he called the taxi company, they said, oh, too bad, you know, there was a taxi just there. And, you know, and I saw this, and so I went up. I was like waiting for a bus to go to New York, and like I was the only one that went up to him and said, hey, you know, what's going on? And someone even said to me, you know, maybe you shouldn't get involved. And this guy was like nicely dressed, nicely groomed, you know, button down shirt, nice pants. I mean, it wasn't like he, you know, was covered in tattoos and had his butt hanging out of his pants, which wouldn't have mattered, but he was very, very, you know, business casual dressed. And, you know, and he was used to it. And, you know, I think we just need to be present. I think you should also put your money where your mouth is. And I think a lot of some congregations are really trying to, you know, to do more social action on this whole issue, at least the one that, you know, I was just moved from Boston, but Temple Israel was very involved, you know, it's very, very involved, and it integrates everything. And I think, you know, that's what you need to do as much as you possibly can. And
Thank you, Helene. Thank you. And before we get to, and I definitely want us to think about things we can do, I don't want to skip past this issue about people not understanding it. Because until last week, I was one of those people who didn't understand it. And I was very adamant that I wasn't white because I was Jewish, because I had been discriminated against, and I just didn't get it. And then it finally hit home for me last week with all of these people getting killed. And it just, you know, it's not like I had spoken up about police killing unarmed black men and unarmed black children. And so I think, you know, for Mussar, you know, it's really about like, where do I need to grow? And I publicly apologized. I didn't get it. And so I want us to try to stay patient with people who may not as yet get it. Because if we get, in my opinion, if we get angry at them or shame them or other things, it's going to make people defensive. And it doesn't necessarily, there's a lot of impatience that I have with this, but I also know part of like the silence teachings is about not shaming people. Because when you shame people, as Brene Brown says, any capacity they have to grow and change goes away. So this is not a time though where we can stay on the sidelines. Like the times where we could be, where we could just sort of let this thing work itself out. I think that time is over. You know, and it's long past due, and we're all sort of being called to be present to this issue and to take a stand and to step in and to do something. So we can, Nancy. Okay, Nancy, I've unmuted you. Oh, you may, oh, I think we're both trying to. Okay, I'll unmute you. I'm trying to unmute you. Okay, you're still not unmuted. Okay, Nancy, why don't you unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I don't want to be shamed by not understanding what white privilege is. Because I grew up in the 50s and 60s at an elementary school that bused the black children in from East LA. I never considered myself white. I never considered my skin color, except that I'm very pale and people would call me Casper the Friendly Ghost. I'm from the South. My family's from the South. My cousin is white. She had a black boyfriend. She has a mulatto child. You know, we were never taught about the difference of color or race. We accepted everybody and loved everybody. And when I first heard this definition, I don't want to be shamed that I don't understand what it really means, because I want to learn more about it. And some of my best and closest friends are Black, and they're all equal to me, and I am no better than they are.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And I think there's a lot of people who just don't understand. They could be good-hearted and would never hesitate to do something, but just not, you know, and again, speaking as one of those people who really didn't get it, you know, I just didn't get it. And I think a lot of people are getting it now that maybe didn't. Judah.
Yeah, I think it's important that regardless of personally how we feel, you know, people who want to be like all kumbaya and say, well, all lives matter. That's missing the point. Of course, all lives matter. Of course, you and I may think, do not, you know, feel prejudiced or whatever. But Black lives are being ended right now, and ours aren't. You know, and that's what it's about. That we have a privilege. That this is not happening to us right now. And it's not that we're better or they're worse or anybody, you know, it's not all that. It's just that there's not a level playing field in our society, in many respects of the society. And in our breakout room, you know, somebody was talking about the educational opportunities and the financial opportunities, and, you know, and then I was talking about, you know, more the safety issues of you know, being stopped by the police or whatever. But it's the Black lives that are being taken by racism. I mean, I've felt discrimination all my life. I've been marginalized. I'm gay, I'm Jewish, I'm this, I'm that. And yet I've never felt my life was, I had to worry when I, you know, well, sometimes, but not like the Black community in America today. Thanks.
Thank you,
Did
Judah.
anyone see the PBS last night, the NewsHour? Because what was really interesting was that all these police unions have these very like ironclad contracts that makes it very, very hard to prosecute when there is when there's charges that they have treated someone unjustly. And it's something like 7% or 5% of them end up with like sort of an investigation or going anywhere. And that even when cities want to do stuff now, these contracts prevent them. If you can watch
Thank you, Helene. I would like to share a little bit of Jewish wisdom to sort of help guide us again and how we can show up in this circumstance. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint. I feel so weird that I don't have video, but I tried turning it on again and I started getting trouble.
Can't hear you, Greg.
Yep, we lost you.
Can't hear you. Lost you.
Oh, I thought that was just me.
You faded out.
Okay. Okay, I've tried changing my Wi-Fi network again. Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe when I started sharing, that was causing the issue. So let me try. Tell me if when I start sharing, if you can't hear me again, and then I'll just talk without doing the share. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to share with you the spectrum of silence, which again governs when we speak, when we don't speak. And if we have too little speech, it can be hurtful. And if we have too much speech, or too much silence, sorry, we can have a lack of helpful speech. So one of the friends of mine on Facebook shared a post, which I asked permission of the person who shared this graphic, which to me, it seems like it's something which can, speech which can be both hurtful and unhelpful. And then I heard a couple of people talking about the importance of listening to Black people. So this was an African-American man. And it's, as you can see, this graphic is about the dangers of the I don't see color mentality.
Thank you.
And I have to say that, you know, again, I think this is another case where someone who might think that they're really, like when they're saying this, it means I am loving and accepting to everyone. But this graphic is suggesting that there are some real downsides to this. And again, I think this is a little bit painful for me to look at because I may have fallen into some of these traps myself. It may be painful to other people, and that's okay because that's part of the growth process, or maybe you disagree with it. But I would love to hear from the group. It's like, is there something that you see on here which either resonates with you as something that maybe you hadn't thought of before, or an area where you can grow, or something that you really, really agree with or disagree with?
I have a really administrative question. What is POC?
POC means person of color.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Sure. Anybody find this surprising or challenging?
I would say, although I definitely see the good intentions of saying I don't see color, there's a level of neutrality there that is, you know, it's one of those cases where if you aren't against it, you're facilitating it. People a lot of times are like, well, I'm not racist, but that's not necessarily enough because there's no actual action that goes with not racist. Like you need to be actively anti-racist because, you know, racism is a structural issue that pervades every part of society. So the neutrality of like, well, I don't see color is, it's not helping anyone. It's not doing anything to try and dismantle that the structural inequities there.
Yeah, yeah. So what you're saying that sort of fits with a number of things on here, like it can, you know, ignore some of the complexities of racial issues. It's like, well, maybe even if you don't see color, other people sure see color. And they're causing a lot of problems with that. Any other thoughts about this, or should I move on?
Yeah, I have a Canadian perspective because I do actually live in a different country and coming from Europe, so I have some difference here. I think so. The question is much more complex than we are just talking here about black and white. Are you? Sorry, not black and white and up and down. Kind of binary system. That's not that. Are you racist or not? Because there is a lots of stuff in between. Like in Canada, we have this system that you have to be politically correct. While being politically correct, while you can't call somebody black, or if you type a word black, it has to become starting with a capital letter, and on and on. And so the society artificially tried to equalize these problems for a long time. And at the same time, it comes with problems. Like at this moment, if you want to apply for a job somewhere, and if you are a white male, don't even bother. They will not take your resumes. And that is not right. So suddenly the white privilege will just disappear. But because, well, they are only hiring people of color because they are not represented in a system as it is. So that's why many people are not happy about that. So I think that we need to look at this in more complex way. And then somebody asked earlier, would I be what? You know what? If I could pick to be Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder or Louis Armstrong, yes, I would like to be black, absolutely, immediately. Because I'm musically, I see black people and white people in a way of music because I'm musician. So it's I think it's just complex.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it also highlights the importance of looking at this from the Mussar perspective, which is from other perspectives. It's like, where do I sort of fit on this? Where, you know, what degree do I have a bias? What degree have I been a bystander? What degree have I, you know, what degree have I stepped up and tried to, you know, be inclusive? So that's sort of where, you know, because we could get into an argument about, is that the right social policy or not? And there's real downsides and there are good intentions for that policy. But if we bring it back internally, well, what can I do? And where do I sit in this? Linda.
No, if this is naive or tangential, but where do the people fit in who say that they really value diversity and feel their lives are enriched by having people from other cultures and other countries? What do you think?
You know, can I say something?
Please.
So I think that there are two ways of looking at this problem. One is how you feel, and one is how the Black people feel. And I think there are many of us who feel that we accept many different diversities and would go to many great efforts to include and make clear that we value Black people or any other diversity. That doesn't address the question of and let's take Black people for the moment. What are the Black people experiencing? I mean, we mentioned the police, we mentioned financial, we mentioned, you know, being given all the junk work. There's also, you know, just going into a department store and having the security people follow you around thinking that you're gonna swipe something. So I just think we need to separate out whether we're talking about how we ourselves feel towards others or how we think the other person feels in the community. So that's what I think is also something we need to think about.
Thank you.
And I also would like to say that it's very easy for many people to say, oh, I value diversity. I have all kinds of diverse friends. I'm not prejudiced. I'm not racist. But how would they feel if they or one of their kids didn't get into a school because the Black person got in and they didn't? I think when it hits us at a real personal level, it's different. And all studies have shown that I think almost everybody has unconscious racism. Because if they show you pictures of a Black person and a white person, people have doing the same thing. People have different responses. If you send in a resume and you have a quote, Black sounding name, but you have the same qualifications as someone with a white sounding name, the white person is the one that gets it. And I don't know how many people are aware consciously that they're doing this. And I don't like to admit that I have a racist part, but I grew up, my parents were not racist. So I never heard Black people or any group put down. But I grew up in a white neighborhood. I didn't know Black people. And I'm part of a culture that's racist. So I do my best not to let it influence me. And I remember years ago, I was going to take a class. And I was walking, it was a Sunday morning, I was walking down a street that was deserted. And there was a Black man sitting on the porch rocking. And I was horrified that I reacted differently. If it was a white man sitting there rocking, I don't even think I would have noticed. But this was, I didn't change my behavior. I mean, I kept walking, but I was horrified that I had this automatic, unconscious reaction because he was Black.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing your own story and some of the really important research that's out there. And it is painful to admit. It's painful for me to admit that I have some of those reactions, because we can't help but being exposed to that in this culture. And it's not to say that every single person does, but a lot of us do. There's a really important principle, I think, two principles that we can use when it comes to silence to guide us here. And the first one is from the book Heshbon HaNefesh: before you open your mouth, be silent and reflect. What benefit will my speech bring me or others? And this has this touches on a number of things we've talked about. One is maybe we should be listening, and not, if we have an opportunity to listen to someone who's experienced this kind of prejudice. I have to say, I'm still really confused about my camera being off, because I'm nodding and talking with my hands, just for the record. So that's one thing, is what benefit will my speech bring to me or others? And the second principle comes from Rabbi Hillel, that one should always compliment a bride as beautiful on her wedding day. Now, this is a little bit dated in that it could be seen as, and I got in an argument with my editor of the book, who was horrified that this was so patriarchal and reinforcing the standard as women being only valued from their beauty. So as I wrote in the chapter, really this is a time of joy, and we shouldn't be making snide comments about how the bride or groom looks. And what's most important in this context is we also should look for opportunities to proactively contribute to the joyous occasion. And I think that's what we really need to do today, is we need to figure out, coming back to this, how can we proactively contribute to a solution here? How can we proactively contribute to, becoming an anti-racist? Which brings us to, so some of these sorts of phrases which are out here, like I'm not a racist, or I don't see color, or I have white privilege, or maybe saying to a Black person, I'm just so upset about how African Americans are treated by the police. I'd like to talk about that one. What's wrong with that? I really am upset by that. What's wrong with me going up to, or is it wrong for me going up to a Black person and saying that? What's the downside? I'm trying to be helpful. Feel so bad about what you're going through. Yes.
I guess if, it's easier to tell that to an African American than to say it in a public meeting or to a police or whatever. So it's gratuitous rather than helpful.
Yeah, it sounds a little patronizing.
Yep.
Could be patronizing, could be gratuitous. Yeah. What else?
It doesn't go far enough.
Okay.
And I also, sorry, I thought you were done, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see each other as we talk about this.
I was going to say, like, in a way, it's making something that is incredibly painful for them about you and your feelings. And that's a dynamic that happens very often in when you're looking at privilege. A lot of the times when you are trying to actually address something that is an issue, the person who's in the position of privilege will make it all about them and their feelings. And, I've definitely heard of a lot of stories where, like, people get more upset about being called racist than about the actual thing that happened that was racist, and that is a really dangerous place to go, even if you are coming from a well-meaning place, because it really reinforces that kind of power dynamic where it really is more about you and your feelings. Sorry, I'm not really wording.
Well, that was very clear. And one of the things I didn't share when we began as our assumption is that we have this conflict between the evil inclination and the good inclination. And the evil inclination is always there trying to make it about us. oh, it's about me, it's about my pain. And the good inclination, it's trying to help you be there for someone else's pain. So yeah, and this is a trap we all fall into. And it's very painful. It's a very painful recognition sometimes when we might realize that we've fallen into this. Jana, I see your little hand is raised. I don't know if you have a comment you'd like to add. So you should unmute yourself. Did I catch you when you were having a snack? Sorry about that.
Here we go. When I was a kid in the New York City public schools, every year we had Brotherhood Week, and we had to make posters. And one of the points we were told, we're all the same. And unfortunately, we're not all the same. And I think we've been given a bad message. You know, we were trained not to see color. But in the process, we made people of color, or people who are Black or whatever, invisible. And if we don't see color, then we really can't, and acknowledge it, we can't get to know people.
Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't think the person who came up with that, I mean, it probably wasn't like intended to like make people invisible or anything like that, but it certainly seems to have had that effect. And it's kind of back to the I'm not a racist. It's sort of like to say that we're all the same is ignoring a reality that we're not all the same. You know, we're just not. And, you know, to go back to another Mussar assumption, you know, we all have a divine spark, which is included by our baggage. It's very different to say that we all have, as human beings, infinite value, and that each human life has infinite value. But that doesn't mean that we're all the same. You know, some of us are much more talented. Some of us have, you know, more money, and some of us have a skin color which puts us at a disadvantage or gives us an advantage.
That's right. And it's not just a question of skin color, really, and that's what we were taught. We have different cultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Black people and Indian people from India may have the same color, but they're not the same by any means.
Yeah. And people from Africa are not the same either.
Right. Our tenant is from Africa. Interestingly enough, he gets treated a lot better than African Americans.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of cultural evidence for that. I wanted to share a story that a friend of mine shared with me, which relates to what Andrew was talking about making it about yourself, where a very close friend of mine, he became a widower in his early 40s. His wife died of cancer at 36. It was a horribly tragic situation. And he said that some of her friends would go to him for comfort. Like they'd be like, this is so terrible. This is the worst thing that ever happened. And this man had lost his wife. And someone who, she was closer to him than anybody. And so, but someone got so wrapped up in their own grief that they lost sight of the fact that they were supposed to be comforting him and that they should be going somewhere else. And I think that is kind of that same dynamic when it's like, yeah, I am really upset. I am not sleeping well. I'm super upset about all of this. But it's not for me to go to my Black friends to comfort me about the situation. You know, I need to be there to comfort him. And maybe we can get to a place where we can comfort each other. But it's certainly, in, you know, this circumstance, it's not about me, it's about him and what he's going through. Other thoughts?
Well, there's another thing that happens between Jews and Blacks sometimes, is that, you know, it becomes a contest of comparing who's been prejudiced, who's been discriminated against, you know, and the fact is you can't win. That's not a contest anybody can win.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can throw in other people too, the Native Americans, and, you know, everybody's, you know, many groups have had terrible things that have happened to them, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. I also want to, before we go, And again, our principle is before we speak, think about the impact we'll have on other people. There's a lot of writing by Jews of color, which I've been reading over the last few years, where they will come to a synagogue and people will say, oh, you know, what are you doing here? Or, oh, when did you convert? Or, oh, are you really Jewish? And, you know, there are Jews of color who go back generations and generations. You know, there are synagogues on Jamaica, that there are, and then people say, like, so-and-so's, you know, wife is Indian, why doesn't she come to shul? Or so-and-so's husband is black, why doesn't he come to shul? And again, it's not, you know, I don't think that's like an overt, I'm going to try to exclude or other somebody. But if we don't really think about the impact of our speech on other people, we can really do some hurtful things, which we just haven't recognized. And again, no one is immune in this country from having made mistakes in this arena, but we all have an opportunity to do better and to listen more. And so it kind of in our last few minutes, I would like, again, to open it up. If people have some thoughts about maybe something that you can do better, you know, what can you do to sort of dismantle white supremacy? Or what can you do to support people better? Ellen, did I see you raise your hand there? Or were you just moving your hand? You may need to unmute yourself. I can't hear you. We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Okay, Ellen. Whoop.
I think what we can do most actively is to elect people who are pretty progressive, who are going to pick police chiefs and stuff who will come down harder, and policemen, I don't think it's in the training, I think it's in the execution. If a policeman does something bad, he should be punished for it. If he murders somebody, he should be punished for it. And they need to change the laws from the union that protect them, and that, I'd say, racists let happen those laws, because they knew what was going to happen when they passed that law. It was no secret to anyone. And so I think we have to work on our elected process to get better people in the government.
I would certainly say that elections are part of it. And I would say that if we really want to do the hard work of personal growth and transformation, I would say to people to think about, and what is it that, you know, I can do personally? Leslie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, these are just some thoughts, and I apologize, I'm not an expert on this issue, so if I misstep, it's unintentional. But I think that every community with Black people is different, and it's a huge tangled ball, racism and inequality. And I'm thinking, I don't know if it's possible to go to different communities and find out what are the 2 or 3 things you need first. And one community might be to get better loans for people to buy houses and businesses. Other communities actually might ask for more policing, that there is a drug and gang problem where they live, and they would like to have a better relationship with their police to maybe take it on in a less violent, different manner. And I think, you know, to listen community by community, town by town, and if each town started with the top 2 or 3 things, maybe we could untangle, because we're a big country, and you know, sometimes like we try to solve problems with a sledgehammer when we need a crochet needle, a lot of crochet needles. Anyway, those are just my thoughts, and I don't, like I said, I'm not an expert in race relations or anything, but.
Well, Leslie, thank you. I thought you said 2 really beautiful things there. One was, I'm not an expert and I might be making a mistake, which is, I think, I very well could be making mistakes here too. And as we engage in this, we're going to make mistakes. And that's okay. You know, we just try to listen and learn. And the other was to go to a community and ask what you can do. Rabbi Mel Gottlieb, who's the president of my Academy of Jewish Religion, California, where I'm in rabbinical school, he said, I called up this reverend, and I can't remember his name, from a community we work with, and he said, what do you need? And he said, we're doing a community garden, and we'd love you to come down and garden with us, and we can work together on this. And so just asking what people need, I think, is beautiful, because different communities are going to need different things. And we can also ask our friends, what do you need? Do you need anything? What can I do for you? Are you okay? Yeah. Carol.
We can read and Black voices and listen. I posted a few books I recommended in the chat, and hear what things are like from their point of view. That's not done. I mean, people are not listening, and that's a big piece of the problem. I hear so many white people trying to white-splain racism to Black people. And it's
right. So focusing on the positive things that we can do. I'm hearing you say that we can really listen better, and put some great books that we can read by Black authors. You know, I noticed on Amazon, the #1 book was White Fragility, which I think is an important.
It's great.
It's a great book. It's also happens to be by a white author, and some people pointed out to me, you could also get other books by, people of color. You can go to Black bookstores. So again, I don't think there's any problem with buying White Fragility. It's a great book. It's academic research. I've heard it's great. I have not read it. I have not read a lot in this area other than like blog posts and talks and things like that. Other people, anyone want to be brave and talk about something that you might personally take on?
Well, I would also like to say, I found a couple of really good articles on Facebook, and I've sent them out to friends who said, what an education. I never even knew that. I never even thought about that. So I think if I read a book, it's great. But if I find an article that I can send to people that they'll read, I'm helping to educate them and helping them to look at their behavior too.
Great. Thank you, Linda.
And I think that right there, like you made such an important point. Like the onus to educate white people is on white people. If we don't understand the situation, it's our responsibility to do some research, to listen to people, to get a better grasp of things, and then talk to other white people about the situation. Like when there are such big discrepancies in power dynamics, people aren't necessarily going to listen to the voices of those that are struggling. They're going to listen to their peers. Like that's how you open minds and, get people to actually really take a moment and take the issues seriously.
Thank you, Andrea. And I'm in a wonderful Facebook group called Awarepreneurs by this guy, Zelazar, which I think some of you people on this call might know. And he's been talking about this for a couple of years, and I've really taken that internally. It's like, it's also like does the Black person always want to be the one to explain things? So it also is another way of caring for others. I see we're a little bit over time, so I'm going to close, and then I will stay on for anyone who wants to continue this conversation. So I really want to, first of all, I just want to thank everybody, for really coming with an open heart. And let's all just close our eyes together one more time. And taking a deep breath. And exhale. And let's just really open our hearts to everyone who is in this group tonight, for being here and hanging in there and having an open heart and being willing to listen and being willing to share and being willing to make mistakes. And let's open our compassion to everyone who is a person of color in this country, who's been discriminated against and who's had to fear for their lives. And let's remember all those people for hundreds of years in this country who've lost their lives because because they've been Black, or they've been enslaved, or because they're Latino. And let's open our hearts to everyone who's trying to grow and trying to change and trying to do better. Now a moment of gratitude for this community and this ability to come together and to move forward together to try to make this world a better place. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Okay.